Tailgating with Theo, brought to you by Murray Chrysler down in Morden, Manitoba. I'd like to thank the gentlemen around the horn here this fine afternoon to discuss some sport and participation. I'm your host, Theo Tutkaluk. I've been around sport probably since I came out of the womb with hockey skates. Played every sport growing up, and I never had an issue playing sport or getting involved in any type of sport. I enjoyed the fact that multi-sport was always offered to me as a kid, and I'm sure these gentlemen around the horn will explain to me as well. I'll start with you, Jason Miller, with baseball. Tell us about yourself and how you yourself got into sport as a young kid.
Sure, my name is Jason Miller, Executive Director of Baseball Manitoba, and I have 3 young children just coming up into sport. I grew up in rural Saskatchewan, to be honest. Don't hate me for that. But hockey and baseball were prevalent, of course, and then I enjoyed school sports like volleyball and golf as well. Sports came naturally to me and my family. My mom and dad coached, so it was something that was always a part of my life.
Adam?
Hey, I'm Adam Wedlake. I'm the Executive Director at Basketball Manitoba. Again, I've been around the sport of basketball my whole life. My family's very entrenched in it, and player, but mainly as an administrator the last 25 years now. And game's changed, and it's a great topic to talk about, how we can make the game even more accessible to everybody.
Sure. Don?
Todd Klym, Executive Director with Softball Manitoba. Played the sport of softball for probably 50 of my years in life. I've also administered it. It's just been a great sport. One we can brag about that. You can start playing when you're 4 and continue on playing until you're 104. Parent of 2 boys that played sports, baseball, softball, and hockey, and now have 2 grandkids, and they're running around ready to play some softball as well.
Bill Johnson, I'm the Executive Director with Football Manitoba, and I've been, like the other gentlemen around the table, I've been involved in sport my whole life. I took a little bit of a different path. I got involved in sport for the disabled, wheelchair basketball. My brother had a disability, that's why I got involved in that, and I've actually been involved at a pretty high level. I went to the games in Athens all the way through the games in Rio, so I've seen sport at the highest level and at the grassroots level, and sport has been a great thing for my life. I hope more kids realize that.
Absolutely. You touched on the next topic here because it's very important. Sport as a part of life. And Don, I'm going to start with you. When it comes to sport and it comes to that relationship with life, how important is it for children to have the access first to introductory sport, not just softball, but sport in general?
I think it's really important. Sport, for one thing, is keeps you away from a lot of trouble. It takes up a lot of time, a lot of commitment from the player and the parent as well. But I think it's extremely important, and we try and offer sport to everyone, again, to all kids, rich, poor, those who haven't played the game before, rec level and elite level. I think it's an absolute important aspect of life.
Jason, yourself, you talked about yourself and having 3 young children. How do you manage your personal time with the opportunity for these youngsters to now get involved in sport? I mean, you running away from point A to point B to point C on the same day, and I mean, that's going to be a tremendous time management skill for yourself personally.
No doubt. I think that sport teaches time management and preparation for things. I mean, my wife and I wouldn't be able to get in the door at 5 and out the door at 6 if we weren't ready and had the groceries ready and had the meals prepped and got the kids fed and out the door to practice. So I think that, and me doing that as a child and watching my parents do that for me has taught me a lot about time management, being prepared and executing the plan to get things done. As a student athlete in college, that was a major part. You saw time and time again, new players with exceptional skill would come in but couldn't manage the schedule, the education piece on top of the practice. So being prepared is huge.
Adam, we talked about yourself growing in the basketball world, more of an administrative side, but your dad, Bill, is heavily involved with an MCAC program we were involved with last month. I'm going to ask you a personal question. If your dad wasn't involved in basketball, would you have thought of being a part of basketball, or would it be something, perhaps maybe some other activity extracurricular-wise you might have gotten into?
Sport, yes. Again, I grew up with my father and my uncle who were very entrenched in the game, still are. So it kind of came in the blood, and that's how my family, including my own kids, same story where they're both played, they both officiate now. I've coached, been very involved. I think that's one of the bigger challenges that the society may face is sometimes if a family or a young person doesn't have that family dynamic, maybe it's challenges at home, or it's a new Canadian situation, maybe there's a language barrier, financial barriers, sometimes don't have that same level or that same drive or push to get involved in sports. Maybe those opportunities just aren't as available. And that's one of our goals as a sport, just like a fellow sports here, is to remove or try to break down some of those barriers.
And the barriers absolutely are a lot easier when you have siblings or parents involved in sport as well. And Bill, you brought up a great idea, a great conversation piece. Was it your brother that was involved in Special Olympics? And how did you Paralympics? Sorry, how did you see that as part of your gateway, becoming involved as not just an executive director like everyone else at the table? I feel like I'm the least involved here because everyone's got the executive director label with it, but not to shy away from it. How did you see that involvement from your perspective, personally working with family in Paralympics?
Well, it's funny because it's when we were kids, that's all we knew, right? So my brother we'd grown up playing sport together, and then he developed a hip disease, a preventative from playing other sports, so we just played wheelchair basketball together. It's just what kids do, right? And I see that with football as well, that the older brother plays football, and then the younger sister comes out and says, you know what, that's what my brother does, that's what I want to do. As Adam spoke of, it's what your family does, it's just what you do. So it's, people always look at, oh, that's so nice that you got to play wheelchair basketball with your brother. No, we got to play sport together, and that's all it was. So I played with him, and then realized it wasn't very good and started coaching.
So, just there, it's as simple as that, eh?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you two more questions before you hit on the break, gentlemen. What was your favorite sport growing up? Personally, for me, it has to be hockey. I mean, if it wasn't hockey, then it was football. I mean, I enjoyed contact. I never removed myself from contact. I loved the fact that I could, hit somebody and let the ambulance sort them out at the end of the day kind of thing. But Jason, for you, was it baseball all the time, or was it hockey as well? Or
No, I was fortunate enough to play a number of sports, and at 17 or so, I had to make the choice, and I chose baseball in the end because I wanted to go and play college baseball. But I still have a passion for hockey. I still have a passion for golf. I will play those three sports for my whole life, for as long as my body will let me. So I was fortunate enough to play lots, but baseball, I guess, is the winner in the end. Yeah.
Don seen me hit a softball a couple of times, so softball is one of my inferior sports, but I still play. Don, for yourself, what was your favorite sport?
I think it was a good split between hockey and baseball. Now we're getting specialty sports where kids are playing softball year-round, they're playing baseball year-round. I like the feeling of springtime came around and you'd get your glove out and you were pumped to get out in the ball diamond. Same with when the fall came, it was hockey season. For us, it's a split between both. And to get the clubs out now between any of those three sports, it's a toss-up. But
I'd be disowned or probably fired if I didn't say basketball, but obviously that's where I grew up. Like you said, out of the womb, I was definitely involved in that just as a youngster, even just around my family. But soccer was also a big part. My next generation above me, my grandparents' generation, was very involved with soccer, so that's where we did that. That was, like Don said, just about the complementary of basketball season in the wintertime. Come summer, it was soccer season, so we kind of allowed us a chance to get out of the gym and do something else. And I think that's definitely a challenge these days of this over-specialization of kids that feel that if you don't start at age 5 and you don't go 12 months of the year with a certain sport, then you're going to be missing out on something. And that brings up the whole concepts of burnout and overuse injuries and all the other pieces that may come up with playing a little too much. So
topic here.
I'm segueing for you there.
We're going to get into that real quick. Bill, for yourself, what did you enjoy? Which sport did you enjoy growing up with?
I actually grew up playing football. I know people think that sounds contrived and placed, but no, that was my sport. That's what we did, and I played both on a structured team and a structured league, Pop Warner football at the time, and I also we used to just get together with a bunch of the guys, and you'd go knocking on some doors on a Saturday morning, and you'd get a game going in a field, and we would play flag, or we would play touch, or we would sometimes play non-sanctioned by the parents tackle football in the field, and that's just what you did. And
on the concrete with the curves, no snow. Absolutely, we won't get into that. You brought up one more question before we hit the break, guys. Where do you see yourselves as executive directors? And I mean, you see a lot of the numbers, you see the participation. Is participation up or down in your current sports?
Well, there's two sides to that really. Our tackle numbers for youth have declined for the last few years. A lot of that's around the stigma around injuries and brain injuries and things like that. So we need to do a better job telling people what it is we're doing to make the game safer and things. But then we see the other side of that, which is high school numbers are basically maintaining in tackle football, and then flag numbers are exploding. We have kids playing flag football all over the place now. There's leagues popping up in tiny little communities all over the province and over the country. So it's really growing quickly.
Don, for yourself.
Ours are pretty stable. We see our numbers growing in the grassroots and the younger kids playing, but then our older groups, so with the girls and guys that are registered with us, it looks like our numbers are down, but a lot of them are playing mixed slow pitch and co-ed slow pitch that don't really register through the association, so it's really hard to track those numbers, but people are still playing ball at a pretty good level.
They got it.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Because when you get older, it just gets more exciting, right?
exactly.
There you go. Adam?
Overall up, especially on the youth ages. We're seeing more and more. Our biggest driver is typically through immigration, both Asian and African immigration into Winnipeg and Manitoba here. The second most spoken language in Winnipeg now is the Filipino language, and that's where our number one growth of our numbers are coming out of that community by far. But things like the Raptors winning this last spring, that only helps. We saw a Raptor bump, as we call it, probably about a 12-15% growth. It's hard to sometimes say specifically, but it was definitely, if you look at our track numbers, you'll see 2019 definitely a blip, and we can attribute that to the buzz that the Raptors gave us.
And that'd be a pretty good season considering the fact that they got rid of Kawhi and they're third in the NBA still.
Yeah, most people wrote him off after last season's trades.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It'd be better if the Blue Jays, maybe in the Gold Eyes, would have some success on the field for you, Jason.
Yeah, sure. I mean, historically speaking, we had our all-time lows in the mid-2000s. Since 2008, Baseball Canada has done wonderful things, and we've integrated a lot of those into some grassroots programming that have built our numbers up steadily over the last decade. The last 2 years, we've seen a plateau, so we kind of know where we're sitting right now and where we need to improve. The Blue Jays getting to the playoffs was helpful. He talked about the Raptors blip. We had a minor Blue Jays blip. If they had won the World Series, maybe it would have been bigger. But ultimately, it comes down to our volunteers and our programs. That's where the quality is. The Blue Jays winning and losing is nice, winning is nice, losing not so much. But ultimately, things are good for baseball.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We're going to talk about seeing kids playing just sport on their own, but also how they're going to be able to appreciate the fact that, you know, all these associations are taking the time, the effort, and the volunteers to put together programs in those seasons so that if they do want to try a sport, they're able to. We'll be right back. Tailgating with Theo. Welcome back to Tailgating with Theo, joined by 4 executive directors. I'm not one of them. I just want to put that out there. I'd like to give a shout out to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers also for helping out the tackle football and flag football program that was not mentioned in the previous segment. So just want to make sure Bill's got a job next week, which he will, I'm sure. Speaking of getting those numbers up, when is the last time, gentlemen, you had to honk your horn to have kids get out of the streets because they were playing a football or a hockey game unexpectedly? Remember?
Can't remember the time, no. It's been a long time.
They don't play Fortnite on the street, so it's a lot of them out there.
I didn't want to bring up video games, but are there other, distractions, for lack of a better term, for young children not getting involved in sport? I mean, I remember the days when I was 5 or 6 and I got my first baseball glove or my first soccer ball, and I'd be kicking it around or punting it around the football, and, just learning the basic concepts of throw, catch, kick, plant foot. Is it something that we're just not doing as parents, as a society anymore? Or is it something that we're just realizing that we're now taking a back seat to something else that's maybe more important?
I think it's a different world now. We used to play unorganized 6 days a week and have an organized game once a week, whether it was hockey or baseball, softball. Our lunch hours were just flooded with kids playing work your way up or whatever they want to call it these days. There was no certified coaches, there's no police checks, there was no awards given out, but nobody cared about that. And we all turned out to be pretty good athletes.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, that's definitely what's, and I think you said that you touched on that earlier there, Theo, about screen time. I think that's definitely a massive shift from our youth growing up. Sport was a great reason to get out of the house and just go bang on the door and say and pick up whatever ball. And I never played organized hockey in my life, but I played a lot of street hockey, and I loved it. And that was great, and that was fun, and it was cheap and easy, and there was no planning, no driving, no wards, no fees, no administrators, no maybe that we're talking about ourselves right here. Careful what we say, but that sort of sport for the sake of sport or just for the sake of play. We still see an element of that in basketball with pickup games and that sort of. You can really take a ball and you have a ball and a hoop and go play by yourself. You don't need somebody, but that element of that casual just pickup concept, unfortunately, is something that we really been seeing sliding the last generation here.
Yeah, I think that as a society, as a parent of young children, looking back on my childhood, when I was 8 years old, and the freedom that I had in my community, and to go to the neighbor's house and go banging on doors and go get a scrub game going, that was a huge part of my life from 7 or 8 until I was a teenager and into elite sports. So, and my children now, that's not something that they do. It's not something that parents let their kids do.
We don't even know our neighbors, that's why.
Right, don't know your neighbors. It's organized play dates where you're driving your kid to someone else's house so they can play together. Everything is much more programmed, structured, scheduled by parents and by organizers.
Is it because our world is becoming too scheduled, Bill, do you think? That we're just not allowing, I mean, you see like commercials out there to go grab your wild side with RVs and whatnot. Is it we're just too scheduled as a society to say, hey, you know what? There's nothing wrong with downtime, pickup time for the boys and girls to play a little sport together and knock on the doors. Is it just something we just don't allow anymore? Is it? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's part of it, but I also think there's the professionalization of youth sport, which is, I mean, people have this dream, right? They think that, hey, my kid's going to go to the CFL or the NFL or the NHL or the NBA, and they think, I can't get left behind. Little Johnny down the street's doing this summer camp for his hockey team. My kid's got to do that hockey camp as well, and before you know it, they have so many things. I sit here and I talk about this, and I look at my own house, and my kids have activities going on 6 nights a week, and we're running them all over the place doing this. And I mean, those times we talk about where we had those pickup games and we played all these things, that's because we didn't have the structured time. We had the opportunity to go to. I tell people all the time in the football community, you know, if we put a ball out on the field and let a bunch of kids go out there, they'll figure it out. They'll play a game. They'll get things going. It's only when the adults get involved we tend to screw it up for them a little bit. So.
It's funny you mention that because it's amazing what children learn as they get older. And when they're younger and they pick up a ball, like a softball or a baseball, for example, or a basketball, and they look at that net or they look at that target, they got to figure out for themselves, without any type of education, how do I get this from point A to point B? We've taken away that imagination, kind of. How do we're not going to reinvent the wheel, but is there a way we can reestablish that pickup style for kids and allow them just to play? Or are we too far gone and we've now become more specialized and more organized with association?
At the younger ages is the challenge. Like we've in the last 20 years have built a lot of outdoor basketball courts around the greater Winnipeg area, and they're heavily used, and they're great courts, top notch. Like we would have died if we saw those when we were young. Really good quality courts, and it's that 20-somethings, the 30-something players, ages, that are really drawn to that. It's the younger ones, again, like it's been already said about the over-scheduled lives that we live, and I think how do we change that? How do we break that? I guess it's that level of trust or confidence that parents can say, "Hey, my kids." Where like our rules was, okay, go out and come home when the streetlights came on, and in the middle of summer day, that was like 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, we'd be out, and we all made it, we all lived, and but there's that paranoia, it seems at times, that families may not want that sort of go out and come back and we cross our fingers that my kid will see tomorrow. I guess there's that built-in fear that may be there.
But let me ask you this question, Jason, then real quick, because if sport has always been, for me and probably for all of you gentlemen as well, it's been a safe place. It's always been like a safety net for when you grew up, if you were around your friends, your colleagues, and you knew they had power in numbers if you were playing a scrub game together, and you weren't going to be worried about the outside world. It was kind of a separation. do the kids not have that now, or is it just something they're not used to, or we just haven't given them the opportunity to experience it?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there is a disconnect between neighbors. I think Don touched on that a little bit. We don't always know who the people are that live in our community, and our kids that are in that little community don't necessarily go to school together. They don't necessarily play club amateur sport together, so they don't know each other. Whereas I think 20 and 30 years ago, we knew everyone that lived on our street. We knew where the kids were that would maybe play, and we would be able to go explore. And parents don't let that happen, and kids don't feel comfortable going and doing it because they don't necessarily know all the people in their community.
Don, you probably lived a shelter life when you were young.
Not really. We just got kicked out of the house and played wherever.
That's exactly what it was. You got kicked out of the house instead of saying, okay, go to your room.
I grew up on a farm, and both my parents worked. We had to bike into town a couple of miles, and you just joined the game and then bike back home. No structure at all again, and nobody coached us. And that just turns into this whole development mode too. Nowadays, it's all our hockey players. If you look in the NHL, the players are just unbelievable, some of the talents they have. But it's the Canadian way. We teach, here's the way, say with softball and hitting. There's only one way to hit. When I grew up, you swung a bat any way you could, and everybody had their own hitting style and all that. Now, these girls in softball all have to hit exactly the same way. You're breaking down a kid that is already hitting good. And I think of that's good for a minimum amount of kids that go up to, for us, it'll be the national team or the Olympic program, or kids in the NHL or MLB. They've been really they've had the opportunity to go to some high performance camps and learned good hitting skills, good skating skills, whatever. But for the majority of kids that can't afford that, their talents are pushed aside. And like a perfect baseball example, none of these guys will remember Ralph Garr, but he would swing at any pitch, any ball. He had the worst swing in baseball, but he won a batting title twice, 2 years in a row. I think we're way too structured for most of the kids out there.
I think all of us around this table could agree that our personal or independent expression came from pickup games, where we would try to mimic another role model, whether it be batting like somebody. Sure. I remember walking up to plate and thinking I was Griffey with my little wiggle, or taking a slap shot like Al McInnes, or spinning like Barry Sanders with my sock that said you can only hope to contain me, throwing rain balls like Glenn Big Dog Robinson out of Purdue. I mean, those are just names off the top of my head. And we all did that as kids too, I'm sure. We all had favorites.
Sure.
Yeah. Now they're all robots.
Now they're on screen time, right? And that's
exactly.
Is that the biggest?
But I'm not even talking about the kids. I'm talking about the pros. Everyone shoots the same way. Everyone throws the same way. This is the way you have to if you want to be a major leaguer. How do you even mimic that if everyone's the same?
It's a very important question, because I think personal expression really changes a league, changes the way how a child grows up. And if they don't have a chance to properly express themselves, or want to try to express themselves, we're automatically tunnel visioning them to what they have to be. Is that because we're putting too much thought into development, or we're just not allowing, simply put, to let the kids play?
Well, the joy of play is a huge thing. I think that's one thing that if you don't have the end target to reach the pinnacle, which even you look at the number of Manitobans that do make the majors, whatever you want, whatever pro, and if that's our end goal and that's our only definition of success, well, we're fooling ourselves. But I think that sort of just the joy of play is really what's in. I think most kids would have that. They just want to go out and enjoy it, have fun, be with my friends, move my body in some way, and see some early success. That's all great stuff. But we sometimes put this, well, if you're not on the target right now to make it to the major this or the pro that, well, then maybe you should step away because you're already 6. And maybe this isn't your sport.
Already, you're done. You're done playing everything else. You got to play basketball, according to Adam Wedlake.
It's so true.
On record. Go ahead.
We talk so much about pathways, and athletes are on these pathways and stuff. Sometimes they just need the playground. They just need to be out there. I think when I was a kid, and we would have 4 guys get together to play pickup hockey. 4 guys is tough to make pickup hockey work. So you'd say, okay, you got 5 minutes to build your own goalie, and we'd build it out of anything you could find. You'd have like a rake and a pile of snow and stuff, and you'd build your own goalie, and that's what we'd play with.
Put the garbage can sideways, so 2 pads stack. Yeah, absolutely.
We take away our kids' ability to. Kids are still creative, of course they are, but we take that away from them. We tell them, oh, it needs to be structured. You need to do it this way and this way. because you're on this pathway to make it to the top, which, as Adam said, by the time they get there, there's so very few kids that are actually making it that far. Maybe we need to focus more on the overall play rather than the pathway.
Yeah. And different sports are tougher. Like our two sports, if you just try and start when you're a 14-year-old, which is still pretty young, if I want to play baseball or softball, well, throwing the ball from third to first is tough. Hitting a ball is impossible if you're just starting to play and everyone else has played for 9-10 years. Maybe some sports are a lot easier, but if you're talking about 2 of the 4 at this table here right now, it's tough to just jump in if you haven't had the opportunity or the earlier experience.
Well, I agree that the sport has to come back to a play aspect, getting away from less structure and just creating a foundation of what sport has to be redefined as, I think, is vital for children to get involved. And when we come back from the break, we'll talk about how these associations work with not only community clubs, but grassroots programs here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Thunder Bay as well, because we do have to convene over that as well, with regards to some of the cost and some of the misnomers that some of these sports don't actually cost a lot to actually get involved. We'll be right back here at Tailgating with Theo.
From Metal Master. You had an accident? Sometimes they're embarrassing, but they're always inconvenient. We have an incredible staff to take care of you. We have platinum certified techs in 4 different categories. We are certified as a gold class accredited shop. If you've made a claim already, perfect. Call us with your claim number. If you need a claim opened, give us a call. We'll walk you through it. Sometimes you can get a little nervous dealing with NPI. We'll help you out. From Metal Master Auto Body.
So I'd like to thank these gentlemen for joining me to talk about sport. It's like we can't talk about sport every day of the week. We should have a water cooler right in the middle, but we don't need one of those because lots of great discussion here on Tailgating with Theo, brought to you by Murray Chrysler down in Morden, Manitoba. Gentlemen, we're going to get to the crux of the matter here. We're going to mention the word cost. I'm not talking about a material cost, but a time cost and effort cost. Many families think, oh my gosh, it is so expensive to play sport. And I think in our previous 2 segments, we've talked about the fact that sport can be for sport for play, sport for just actual activity, doesn't have to be organized. Really, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but for your 4 sports, basically all is required is a great pair of shoes or a good pair of shoes that are fairly new, fairly supportive, and maybe 1 to 2 items to get involved in the sport. And then usually the community club or the association takes care of everything, correct? Mm-hmm. So I mean, for somebody or some family that is not into getting into sport or wants to have their son or daughter get involved in sport, what else do they need? Like, that's my question. I mean, like, if you have, like Jason, if one of your youngsters wanted to play, like my son who's 7, wanted to learn how to play baseball, the community club's 2 minutes away. I can set up, I can organize, I can even coach if I wanted to.
Yeah, it's fairly easy to get involved, especially under 10. You don't necessarily need baseball pants. You don't necessarily need your own bat or your own helmet. If you had a glove and a pair of shoes and proper fitting clothing, you'd be fine. And the community club or Baseball Manitoba at 7 under will provide the shirt or the jersey. So I mean, registration costs are $100 or less at 9 and under. It's not that inaccessible.
Yeah. And usually some of those club fees can also be remitted back if you're volunteering your time as well. Yeah. So I know that some clubs have like a canteen service or an evening out or a social event that they say, donate a little bit of your time and we'll kick back some of that back to you. So it's a great chance if you, like you said, we talk about knocking on doors. Here's a chance to knock on a door, speaking in a different text, but you get to see some of the other community members involved. Football. Crazy, and people, pads, shoes, cleats, it's all taken care of.
Yeah, we get a lot of people who come, actually, not to speak poorly of hockey, but we get people who come from the hockey community and they look and they think, oh man, I just bought this I just outfitted my kid for $2,000 and all his hockey equipment. Now I want to play football and look at all this stuff. And our clubs provide everything. So basically, even most of our clubs have a cleat exchange program. Kids wear them for a year and then they keep them in house, and they so the next generation can use them as well. So really, you show up at a football club or a community center that has football, they'll give you everything you need.
Yeah. Don, I mean,
Entry level for us, it's called Timbit Softball, and expense is not a worry at all. For $15 a kid, we'll drop off a bag of the equipment. The program we run, it's a cookbook for the coaches, so 5 kids can play at a time and 5 parents. The parents are coaching those 5 kids that are just into entry softball. It's really fast. Some parents don't want to be around for 3 hours, so we turn it into a 1-hour game. Everyone's hitting, everyone's catching, everyone's playing ball. The parents are all involved. From there, it goes up anywhere from U10 to U19 at the minor level. Costs you only $25 a player. For the softball program, equipment, as long as you got a good pair of cleats and your own glove, and even if you can't, we'll try and help you out best we can, or equipment-wise, with a couple of grant programs we can access. But cost is really no reason to stay away from softball.
not at all. Adam, I mean, we talk about kids getting all decked out in their shiny gear and the jersey and the pants and the underpants to the sliding pants to the shoes they got to have the name on them. I mean, shoes are shoes, man. I know some people need to have the name on them, but I remember growing up in my tracks and my Converse that had zero support whatsoever, and I still learned how to play basketball.
Well, for the most part, basketball, again, very low equipment sport. If you're ready for gym class, which every kid goes to gym class, you've got a pair of runners. It doesn't have to be basketball shoes per se, but an indoor runner of some sort and a pair of shorts, you're ready to go. Because the jersey, a ball, is really the only other pieces of equipment, and that's typically provided by the club or the organization. So again, very low barrier. For those that do have, we run a shoe and ball recycling program. We've done over 5,000 items in the last 5 years that we collect over 10 locations in the city here and get them back out to people. We can never assume that we say, oh, you just need a ball and a pair of shoes. For some, that's a challenge, and we can't dismiss that. But our entry-level program, it's called the Junior NBA, supported by the NBA, of course, and it's that get them a ball, get them some material. It's a modified ball as well, which is smaller, lighter. It's been just designed for the really young ages, so it's not only just smaller, but it's lighter, which is surprisingly how much of a difference that does make for young hands, young arms to get the ball up to the rim. And but there's also one other key aspect out there is a group called Kids Sport, which we utilize a lot. Families that are eligible can get up to $300 per year, and that's for all sports. That can help reduce or eliminate a lot of these costs that are out there in most community centers. That's the key word. You mentioned the word Kids Sport, and that can open up a door for a lot of families that may see some barriers still.
So from a material standpoint, cost really shouldn't be a barrier. What about cost and time? When we talk about scheduled times, we say that our lives are so busy. I mean, how are you doing? Oh, I'm busy. Are you really that busy? I mean, I enjoy taking the time out of my day to spend time with my son if I can, any single moment. Yeah. I mean, you talk about the lighter basketball, loves it. Throwing the ball around with my kid, baseball, loves it. Hitting the softball, no doubt. And of course, if you get a chance to tackle dad, he's going to do it. Is our lives is society just that busy that we can't expend that time for kids? Or is it because, we go back to that structure. Should we just let them be and see what happens?
It's, I think busy is a bit of a badge of honor for people nowadays. Oh, I'm so busy and everything. There's always time. There's always time to do things. I coach my son in basketball. I coached my daughter's basketball team last year. I'm helping out with his flag football team. I'm always, you can find time to do these things if you prioritize them. There's actually we talk about people volunteer coaching and things. Football Canada has a really cool program. They partnered with a software company out of Saskatoon, and they created this app so everyone has it on their phone. And for flag and tackle football, it basically has all their practice plans, drills, everything. So now when parents go and say, well, you know what, I don't really have time, I don't really know football enough to plan it all out, I don't want to take the time to invest it, show up at the field, pull out your phone, there it is, everything's there, it's all diagrammed, it animates it for them. It's a really cool thing that removes, we're talking about removing barriers, we're also trying to remove some excuses. So there's one, now you got time to spend with your kid, and do this sort of thing. So it's kind of a cool program.
Don, how important is it to see, you talk about having 5 kids on the field, 5 parents on the field, how important is it for the young Johnny to see mom and dad on the field?
I think it's
Trying?
great. It gives them a lot of confidence right off the hop. A lot of kids are really shy to get out there, especially if they're just introduced to the sport. You're growing up either playing ball with your mom or your dad before you even if you're going to get your kid into a sport, I strongly suggest that. Don't just throw him out on a field and expect him or her to just adjust to the rest of the kids around them, make them comfortable, and that's where Timbits comes in handy, whereas you do have 5 parents and 5 kids out there, and it's just interaction. As far as the time commitment, for my wife and I, we have 2 boys. I'd coach, she'd manage one of the 2 teams, and most of the times we're split off and go with one kid and come back, meet for a quick lunch, and maybe see another game if the other one was playing right after that. And in the summertime, I mean, if you're grab a lawn chair and a bag of seeds and go spend 3 hours with your kids, what's so tough about that?
Nothing.
I mean, there's no excuse.
No. Jason, do you see more parents getting involved at the younger age when it comes to baseball? I mean, I remember when my son was in baseball last year, there was always a call for coaches. There was always we're looking for coaches, and I said, well, what else am I going to do between 6:15 and 7:15 at the ballpark but sit on the other side of the fence when I could be sitting on the right side of the fence with them, hanging out with them, and kind of giving them a word once or twice about coaching and helping them out there? I mean, shouldn't that be the most important bond between a parent and a kid?
Yeah. I mean, I think that all the sports in this building and at this table for sure can say the same thing. It's harder and harder to find volunteers for coaching, scorekeeping, or whatever it might be. It's not that easy, and people have to be convinced. But the more, and he talked about 5-on-5 softball, we have Rally Cap, which is 6-on-6 baseball. Same idea. We train our coaches. We give them all the tools they need to feel comfortable, to invite the parents onto the field to help out. Bring your lawn chair here and put the ball on the tee. So we need to find creative ways and use those ways to get more people involved. And I think they will, if they are. Often if people are asked to contribute and given an easy enough task, they will. There will always be those parents who will drop off and drive away, but those parents aren't that prevalent, and the ones that do stay often just need a little bit of hand-holding to get involved.
Absolutely.
And then they could become very good volunteers for your
I hate
organization.
staring through a fence or sitting on the sidelines. I mean, I have to be involved. It's not coddling, but it's offering, from an adult perspective, a little bit of a lending hand to youngsters that are new to the sport.
It gives you an opportunity to look at the other parents too. Like if I'm coaching hockey, I loved sitting on that side of the arena, and you'd look up and some people would just, I don't know, it's a zoo up there, or it's a different world on the other side of the ice, and you look at them and go, people.
Yeah, we talk about
These are 6-year-olds.
We talk about the distractions and screen time. What if we took the screen time and had a little bucket when you came to the diamond or the rink or the court and said, you got to put your phones in here for an hour. You get them back after you're done when you pick up your kid. I mean, they see. I mean, I could, when I was on the baseball field, I'm working with the pitchers and trying to throw the balls or hitting off the tees, and you look, and 85-90% of parents on the sidelines are staring at a phone or a tablet or something. I'd rather have thank God my parents didn't have phones growing up, and your parents probably too. Like, technology wasn't like it was today.
That phone is mounted to the wall.
That phone was on a long cord in the kitchen, right? And you had to
With
carry
rabbit ears stuck to the top.
Yeah, living
And when it
room to
rang,
living-
everybody ran over to grab it.
I mean, Don probably had the party line back in the day,
for
where 2 short, 1 long. That's my house. I gotta
Everyone
get
knew
on
what our
it.
games are on.
No doubt. Like playing outside in 5 minutes, I'm there. That's when the phone rang.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's like, just if they see the role model as the parent or as the phys ed teacher doing something, chances are that kid is going to want to do the same. And like, quick story, I mean, we removed video games and whatnot from our house 3 months ago. And ever since then, my son has always been more involved in personal attention and enjoyment of other activities. Building forts, board games, collectively doing things cooking-wise, learning sport, going for a skate. There is countless things to do outside of the screen. Adam, you brought up a really smart comment with regards to phys ed. Is phys ed maybe changed its design by not teaching sport-specific sports, rather than saying, okay, we're just going to teach a general topic of activity? Is it more important to teach specific sports in blocks, or just getting them out there and being active?
It's a tough balancing act for sure, because you've got, as a phys ed teacher, you've got limited time, probably limited budget. You're probably in there with a lot more kids than you probably should be, in a facility that may be a little bit outdated, with equipment that may be a little bit outdated, and the pressures to still provide that adequate time in the day to get these kids heart rate up and get some sweat on the forehead and all at the same time. And then by the time you get things moving, like we've done some programs within phys ed classes the last couple of years, and some of these phys ed classes are like literally 20 minutes. And by the time, 20 minutes is nothing. By the time you get anything going, and it's like, hey, buzzer goes, and all right, next group comes in. And it's tough to get going. But that's where I think over the last generation, we've really seen a shift in the more community-oriented kind of sport, where it's more put back to the community centers and other organizations that need to step up and are stepping up, I think, can, of course, do more to fill in that void of the sport experience. Not so much just and I think that's what's good still with phys ed class, it's that understanding that basic fundamental movement skills and being confident with your body that you can, when you see somebody do something out there, you can mimic it or have that somewhat physical ability to be able to not hurt yourself or hurt somebody else, but then take some of those basics movement skills that you've learned and maybe then hopefully find a sport that can bring you into that sort of sport for life concept and keep playing for your whole life.
There's two different groups of ages that I've done studies and research with, and I'm sure you gentlemen are aware that the first group, young ages between 5 and 9, teaching a kid the fundamentals, making sure they don't hurt themselves, more importantly, learn how to throw something properly, learn how to catch something, learn how to run properly. Those, and doing them as fast and as hard as you can, is the first and foremost foundation. And then when you get later on in your years, your early adolescence, your adolescent years, for females, you then start fine-tuning those things. I mean, we don't teach a 6-year-old how to throw a curveball. We teach them how to throw the ball. We teach them how to play safe with a baseball bat, shooting properly with your guided hand on a basketball, learning how to stick handle on ice, and of course, learning how to throw a spiral. Those fundamentals we don't see kids do these days. Is that because of our doing as adults, being the role model that we aren't fulfilling, or is it because kids are just not interested?
I think as a parent, you got to be a leader and take a kid outside to play catch with them. I mean, that's a tradition that's been going on for years. Get out, and it's the parents' responsibility. And God, I hope everyone has time to spend some time with their kids.
Maybe it's not just taking your own kids out, maybe it's knocking on the neighbor's door and getting him out there too. We used to have some epic games of say catch. We played 21 or 500 or whatever you want to call it, with 500. You'd have 30 kids out there playing that when we were kids. And you talk about the fact you just taught kids how to throw. I remember being like 6, 7 years old, the big contest, everyone wanted to learn how to throw a knuckleball. That was our big thing. Everyone was trying to learn how to do it. None of us ever did, but you don't claim you did. I threw one this morning, guys. Watch it.
Did you see it? Yeah, I mean, you hit a very valid point. Getting yourself involved as being the role model. We can talk hours about responsibility and what our role is. We won't get into that today. What we will get into in our next segment here on Tailgating with Theo is the concept of big sport, little sport, and then also the culture of where sport is headed here in Manitoba. We'll be right back on Tailgating with Theo. back at it, Tailgating with Theo, joined by 4 executive directors here at Sport for Life Manitoba building. Very important individuals with a lot of insight, also as not just executive directors, but as parents, because we realize that parents play a vital role in introduction of sport to children. Now, over the last 25 years, we can all say, gentlemen, that our culture has become more, not of a melting pot, but has become very diverse. We're seeing a lot of different generations growing in different populations, growing in different ethnic backgrounds. Some of the sports that are growing and trending here in Canada, not because of population, but because of culture. One being cricket, where we see the cricket fields now being used outside of Assiniboine Park, where they're constantly being filled by everybody in age, pickup games, so to speak, no league whatsoever, just playing cricket. Baseball, different ethnic backgrounds playing baseball, whether from Central America or from the United States, overseas in Asia. Basketball, you talked about the Filipino community, huge, and of course, football has so many different ethnic groups involved already. How important is it to introduce sport to these other groups, but also make sure that they feel welcomed? Because it could be a little bit scary for a 6-7-year-old plus their family to say, I don't know anybody in this sport, how do I, should I be scared?
That's a big steps. I think there's the one that we recognize a lot that we're seeing more and more of is new Canadian females that are coming to Canada. They're coming from a culture or a country that may not value female sport as much as we do in the Western world or in Canada here. And to get that concept through families' brains that your daughter is as much important to play in our sporting community as your son. And to get that concept through, it's improving, but it's definitely one that we're seeing more and more of, and one that we need to work with families to, just because you can say, as I said earlier, that your brother plays, so that means your older brother plays, so it means your younger brother will play, your sister, whatever. We maybe take that for granted here, but sometimes that's a challenge and a barrier for young females that are not even looked upon to see that you can pick up this ball or do whatever just like your brother's doing and succeed or even go further, because there's even more opportunities for young females these days.
Bill, I'm going to ask this question because you and I have talked about earlier, like during we were together in the Sport Hall of Fame downstairs, and we were interviewing some young players for provincials, and it was your son's team, I believe, that was playing football in the provincials.
Yes.
That's an inner city program that would not be getting the recognition or the players without having that involvement, that feeling of safety. Because that's what I noticed from the players, talking to them mostly, and also the congratulations of the parents taking the time to see their sons and daughters excel at a great sport.
Yeah, there's a couple of our football clubs, and I know true of all sports that it's really it's the primary place where some of these kids can feel like they belong to something, and that's so important for these kids. And it teaches them some life lessons too. It teaches them some responsibility. Teaches them how to be a part of a group, how to work with other people, and those are skills that'll carry them forward. We have a rule in our house actually with my kids that until my daughter's 16 and my son is 12, and until they turn 18, they have to participate in a team sport of their choosing. I don't care which one it is. It doesn't have to be football. They both happen to play flag football right now. My son plays tackle as well, but they can choose whatever sport they want, but they have to participate in a team sport, because I think those lessons are so important for all kids to learn, regardless of what your background is, because as you know, once you reach the professional world, you don't get to pick the people you work with, but you've got to be able to work with them. So there's a lot of valuable skills that come from being a part of a team.
Sure. We'll bring up this next question because it's going to lead into the idea of seasonal sports and the fact that we talked earlier in a segment, sports becoming 12 months. Burnout. I mean, we see athletes, professional athletes saying, even themselves, when it's done, that last game in playoffs or regular season is done, that 82-game season is done, I'm not looking at a hockey stick. I'm grabbing a golf club, and this is my off season. How important is it for parents to realize that there's not going to be another 87 or a 99 or an MJ, number 23, or heaven forbid an 18 or whoever your favorite person is, Ladainian Tomlinson, there'll never be another LT. But the bottom line is, how important is it to teach these young children and parents that there is sport outside of that current sport, and teaching them the ideas of cross-training?
Yeah, I think Bill touched on earlier when he said, you look at the kid down the street and I got to put my kid in the camp that kid's in. I mean, it's so important in in baseball specifically and softball obviously, with the, you got to run, you got to hit, you got to throw, you got to catch, and you got to be smart about when you do all those things, and you got to be ready between pitches. Those are skills that are transferable to all sports. The best baseball players that we see come from hockey, they come from basketball, they come from volleyball, maybe even football. So they absolutely have to have experiences in other sports. It is crucial to the development of the overall athlete. All the best baseball players to ever come out of Canada and Manitoba, Larry Walker, Corey Koski, these were high-level hockey players, and in Corey's case, he was a national team volleyball player. So you must be a multi-sport athlete to excel. And as a young child, you need to be just to experience the other sports because they're all so great and they all teach different things.
We're hearing about, athletes in the world today, like Patrick Mahomes, for example. He started off playing 3 or 4 sports, not just football. He didn't pick up a football as a quarterback until his junior year in high school. I mean, MJ played other sports his entire career. Talk about transferring skills. I mean, think about a football player. Think of the 4 things that he has to do. And then think of the next sport that would transfer those sports as well. You talk about baseball and the relationship with hockey, baseball and the relationship with lacrosse. I mean, basketball with the relationship with volleyball. I mean, court sports, the awareness. The sound of a bat and the sound of a ball on a bat is a tremendous instinct skill that nobody has. The sound of a football hitting off a foot, knowing how far it's going to be on a punt. Like, these are all things you learn as you get older, but the basic transfer of knowledge is so vital to every other sport. Because when you think about it, Don, whoever wants to jump in here, when you finish a sport, those skills transfer to the next sport in some way, shape, or form, don't they?
Yeah, I think, but at the same time, for us, most of our girls are playing multi-sports, but our best athletes are also the best. Like our best softball athletes are the best girls in girls' provincials, provincial hockey, volleyball, basketball, whatever you have it. With our guys, the same deal. All our boys program is mostly Aboriginal, which is great. We don't have the NBA, the WNBA, MLB, CFL, NFL. We have nothing. We have World Championships, Pan Am Games, and the Olympic Games to shoot for. National team program. This past year, we've just started a women's pro league in the United States, but again, the transfer of skills, you see it with the girls, it's the best athlete throughout sport to sport. With not having identity of pro leagues, softball relies basically on tradition, and that's where our Aboriginal boys are from, and now the girls. This is all, and just to go back to the family thing, if you go up to Cross Lake, for example, the men are playing, and on the sidelines, the guys and the girls are all throwing, everyone's mimicking their dad on the mound, or who's ever pitching, everyone's throwing windmill at the same time. Cross Lake's been really great with their boys program, and now we're seeing Aboriginal girls teams coming down there as well, as we share that. Before it was only boys only could play, or to a certain level of fast pitch. Now girls down in the south have always played fast pitch, and the north is picking that up, and we're getting a lot of good female athletes coming down from the north as well. But yeah, it's the transfer skills. Definitely multi-sport is what makes a good athlete.
The multi-sport is I think something that's definitely getting more and more lost on today's generation, and that fear of missing out kind of concept, that if I don't go to that camp or league, I'm going to miss that boat. But you look at like Canada's best basketball player, probably arguably ever, Steve Nash. He played high-level soccer right up till he made his last decision. It was probably when he was 17, 18, and that basketball door opened a little wider, but he could have still stuck with soccer and been probably world-class soccer player. And that's where I think you can compare so many sports out there of the different movement skills that really connect us together more than separate us. I think there's also just having that little spice of life. The variety is a spice of life. If I said to you, you got to eat, pick your favorite food right now, I'll throw one out. You say pizza. Okay, eat pizza 3 meals a day for the next 5 years. And I'll ask you in 5 years what your favorite food is. You'll probably say anything but pizza. Give me something else. because I get burned out and I get tired of that. It's like if we don't have that, and I think that's where we look at parents maybe putting that extra pressure on kids to say, well, if you're going to make the majors or the whatever that next level, you got to go 12, 13 months a year. It's not going to happen, because that kid in 5 years or less is going to say, that's enough. I'm going to do nothing. And that's the worst thing. We lose kids to the screen or to the couch. That's the worst thing that happens. I really, if a kid starts playing basketball when they're young and they shift and play softball in their latter years and become a world-class softball, that's wonderful. It's when we do something wrong along the way and that kid gets broken in that pathway and we lose them as a sport altogether, because we lose them as a player, as a participant. But most likely when they become a parent, they've been jaded by sport and they're like, no, not for me. I don't want to do this anymore.
Well, the worst case scenario is when they try and do two sports year round, and we're seeing that more and more with, it's burnout from one sport, but at the same time you're trying to do two at the same time, and that's not working. We've got athletes, we've got a national academy we run half the year. All those our 8 players are involved, so they're playing 12 months a year. Plus they're elite athletes who are playing volleyball 12 months a year or another sport. And it's fear of missing out. I've got to go to that program.
I think it's also a product of our sports system, though, where how many times have we assessed based on our numbers?
Sure.
And so we're all very protective of our numbers, so we all want to hang on to them, and the best way to do that is, more programming, keep them involved year round. So we actually, we create the problem. We can sit here and lament it all we want, but we are the problem at the end of the day, because we're the ones who keep these kids involved, and we own them, basically.
You bring up a very interesting point there, and I want to ask this question to everybody. Basically, listen to this conversation, we can say that a sport being played 12 months a year at a young age is not valuable in any way, shape, or form to the kid, and you're not missing out. We're all safe to say that that's the correct assumption.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
I think from our standpoint, we can offer different camps and different programming year round, but we would want children, especially families, to try different sports seasonally. If it's winter outside, don't pick out a golf club, but maybe grab a hockey stick. If it's spring out there, grab a flag or a baseball bat and put the sticks away. How important is it for us as parents to really spend that time to make sure that we are, would you say 80%, 90% what we have to do as a parent, and allow that system to, and you're protecting your numbers, it's going against the numbers, but just letting players and young kids get used to sport for play's sake.
I'll go totally opposite against that. I wish everyone played softball. I'm not worried about our numbers. But if I had a daughter, I have a granddaughter right now, if she wants to play softball 12 months a year, if she's got her eyes and her mind set on making the national team, she wants to go to an academy for 6 months a year and then play high-level softball 6 months a year, that's her choice, not mine. It's not her parents' choice. I would think if they can afford it, great. If they can't, but it's up to that child.
But at 6 years old, do you think they have that ability to say, I want to do this?
We're not going to no one's going to play academy ball at 6. We're talking early teens.
Right, and that we'll get to that. That'll be our next episode, actually, of Tailgating with Theo. Thanks for segueing that one. But for getting players involved, like 5 to 9, that first sport introduction, there is nothing more important than having great role models, the proper structure, for lack of a better term, to make sure that they're learning some fundamentals, and it's in a safe environment. Those 3 keys have to happen.
Agreed.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think we're doing that here at Manitoba very well. Would you agree?
I think so.
The Timbits program, I've been a part of the Timbits program. I've been a part of the junior NBA program. I've been a part of, tackle football, Pop Warner football growing up, Go Nationals. The bottom line is, it's that introduction and making sure it's a safe place and a place of belonging, like you said, Bill. That's so imperative. Any last words from you gentlemen at all before we say goodbye?
I think a big role, Bill touched on it a little bit, there is some territorial feeling that this is basketball kids, get your hands off them, and vice versa. I'm sure that feeling, not only just within our organizations, but a lot of it comes to the coaches, because the coaches are the ones that are directly interacting with the young kids. But for us to encourage a scheduling system where that you can create and even have that opportunity for that a player that maybe doesn't start playing your sport at age 5 but wants to start at age 10 or 15, is there ways that you can create pathways that will see players have the opportunity to come in and out of your sport, because that will happen. You don't to expect a 5-year-old to be with you when they're 25 at the end, and that's their only experience they've had. It shouldn't be what we expect. There should be opportunities along the pathway for players to come in and out and have that opportunity to try and different sports, and they dabble and they enjoyed it, but they'll come back because they have a love for your sport, or it's something built inside.
Jason?
I think it's the way that we can control a bit of this is keeping our programs and seasons within LTAD principles, or for that under 10-year-old age group, it's 8 to 12 weeks, and then move on to something else. When we run into problems is when we stack programs together or keep kids involved with the sport in these programs that we've created for multiple months. So I think that that's where sport administrators have a bit of, outside of clubs that don't register with us, that's where we can control a bit of that and then push them on or suggest other sports that will contribute to them athletically and bring them back to next season even more ready to go.
Bill?
Yeah, I think that, I think that we need to, as sport administrators, encourage kids to participate in more than one sport and not be so territorial maybe about them. Adam and I have had some preliminary discussions about doing something where we can have kids play football and basketball at the same camp, and I suppose and I know football people are up in arms. Well, we may lose 15 kids to basketball, but you know what? Maybe we'll get 15 kids from basketball who prefer football, and that's okay. And maybe they want to do both for a couple of years and see what they really like, because they're kids and they can do that. And that's what we all did growing up. So maybe we just need to be creative and think outside the box, and maybe take down some of the fences we built around these kids to protect them. And this kid's a football kid, and maybe we find ways to make them a football and a basketball kid, or a football and a baseball kid, or whatever that looks like.
Yeah. I just think listen to what they're telling you and make sure you try and get your point across that activity is important for your kid, family is important, and community is important. And sport and us as administrators can help them out do that.
Well, I want to thank you gentlemen for your time this afternoon. A great conversation. We could talk hours about sport because I know we all love it. We all have a passion for it, but more importantly, we want to see the next generation become even more involved if they enjoy it. And we have to give them that atmosphere and that opportunity for them to enjoy and feel safe and enjoy and do it well. This has been Tailgating with Theo. I want to thank you very much again for joining us this afternoon. Next episode will be the next level of sport with regards to, great, you've chosen that one sport, now what do we do? And where are the resources for it? Thank you very much, Mary Chrysler, for taking care of us today in Morden, Manitoba. We'll talk to you again real soon.